Welcome to our People Solutions webcast, where it is accessible for anyone and everyone to join us, no matter where you are and no matter where home might be. I'm Danielle Houston. I'm a client advocate here at Lockton Companies. And while you might mostly see my face today, we are supported here in Washington with an incredible team of experts, people with a ton of exceptional experience who love providing great customer service. And they are our team who serves our clients here in the Northwest, as well as my counterpart, Ian Flatt, who is also a client advocate like myself. So you might see some of those names, Ian Flatt, Jill Dugo, Paris Ramsey, Drew Butler, who leads our service team. They are also on LinkedIn and available for you to connect with. And in fact, maybe you're here today because one of them invited you to join. I'm going to start with a really brief market update and a little bit about Lockton before we move into the rest of the program that we have planned. And as a reminder, we do have HR credits that are attached to these sessions. So that certificate will come to you planning by the end of the day tomorrow. So we can also send you this recording along with some of the other materials we may reference through this session today. So you'll see this is our great panel of experts that you're seeing their faces. Thank you too to our stop loss team, who's provided a good chunk of information that I'm using in this market update today. The stop loss industry, just like the fully insured insurance market, is navigating the impact of COVID. That includes, specialty pharmacy as a big impact as well on the costs and some of the increases. And then, there are multi-million-dollar treatments like cell and gene therapy. And all of these things are really contributing to some increases that we are hearing and seeing from our own clients. In some cases, these increases that we're hearing about are much larger than what they have been for the last several years. But we've also seen just the core trend increase from all of our carriers by at least 2 or 3 points in some cases. So these stop loss markets in particular are continuing to harden. Carriers have been and are continuing to prepare for increases in overall claims experience, given all of this multifaceted impact from COVID that also really includes that extra additional impact on hospitals and healthcare facilities. They've had losses. There have been a number of things that have occurred in those settings, which is driving up the cost of care. And when the cost of care goes up, the cost of our insurance increases. The impact of certain conditions that are able to be treated by cell and gene therapies have also raised a lot of concerns with the market because the price of these treatments in some cases can exceed $2 million. So the science is amazing. The healthcare is incredible. The cost is also incredible. So carriers are really remaining selective with the risk that they're willing to provide proposal responses for, and that's whether you're self-funded or fully insured. There's advancements in the specialty pharmacy space that continue to drive increases too in catastrophic claims costs. Programs, though, are emerging to help mitigate the risk of these really costly therapies, these cell and gene therapies that I've mentioned. And then, another driver of these increases is delayed care. A lot of people didn't go get the screenings. They delayed surgeries or other treatments because of COVID. And now those things have advanced with some costlier treatments now due to those delays. And then another impact is the federal COBRA and some delayed special enrollment extensions that have caused carriers some concern and wanting to take an extra look at what those risks are. And, when underwriters don't understand the risk, then that typically means that they want to increase some rates. So I hope that gives you a little bit of context around what we're seeing and hearing, and what you might be seeing and hearing if you are starting your renewal conversations, or maybe you're a January group and you're in the thick of it right now. On a more local level, and more on the fully insured side, I mentioned we're seeing and hearing about really large increases, sometimes 20 and 30%. And while some of that can be attributed to claims experience and these same factors that are driving stop loss, I also think we have to mention the fact that many carriers spent these COVID years trying to avoid giving large increases. And, it was at the time this help to employers. So as they navigated all the other changes and some of the other unexpected costs of dealing with the pandemic, they would be good partners. We wouldn't see a lot of disruption. You wouldn't have to deal with more change than what you were already dealing with. But I think we're seeing that catch up. I believe that some of these increases that we are seeing is that bill finally coming due. I have talked with a couple of carrier reps in the last couple of days about what they're seeing, and their stories are very, very similar. They've had more RFP activity and more requests for proposals this year than probably the last 2 years combined. So there's a long waiting period. You might not get a quote because they might look at it and say, we just know that this is not going to rate out well. But in the words of one of the reps, he said, these groups have had 10% increases each year for the last 2 years. Plus this year, they should have had those increases, but they didn't. And now it's all coming due at the same time. So if you haven't tackled your 2023 renewal yet, this isn't a call to panic, not at all. This is a call to prepare. So strategize, have a plan, talk with your advisor. If we aren't your advisor and you'd like to understand how we approach these conversations, we would love to talk with you about that. But with these challenges, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of that change too, because that change is finally going to come due, and we're probably all going to have to make some decisions that maybe are not what we had wanted, but we are forced to do with all of the givens given. So I think that adds even more importance and relevance to the session that Michael Perlmutter will lead with us this morning. So I'm going to hand it over to him in just a moment. I wanted to also give you just a brief little overview of Lockton. You've likely noticed that we're calling this session People Solutions. Lockton has officially transitioned and relaunched our benefits practice to our People Solutions practice. So yes, we still manage employee benefits. I've been fielding that question a lot, but People Solutions is a much more accurate description of all of the work our teams do beyond the renewal spreadsheet. We break that into 3 specific areas of support: employee experience and engagement, total rewards and benefits, and the measurement and management of your programs. So today's conversation is a great example of that. Michael Perlmutter is the director of Lockton's Insights and Innovation Lab. If you'd like to learn more about the work they are doing at Lockton, we have a previously recorded session with Megan Soa where she digs into just that. It's on my YouTube channel. This morning, Michael's going to explore innovative ways you and your teams can improve the employee health and well-being and deliver an amazing employee experience. He's going to give you 4 big ideas to transform your benefit strategy. And that conversation about engagement will transition to a different kind of conversation around engagement with Ty Reed and our panel, who will talk about how you and really all of us can help make our workplaces recovery friendly, have a culture of acceptance, and be a fair chance employer. So Michael, welcome. Will you tell us a little about your background before you dive in?
Great. Well, thanks so much, Danielle, and thanks for having me here. And by the virtual means, I'm coming to you today from New Jersey. So it really is, you can be anywhere now, and I'm happy to be with all of you today. Wish I was with you in Seattle.
Us too.
But Yeah, so I'm Michael Perlmutter, and as Danielle mentioned, I lead the Insights and Innovation Lab, which is a new function inside of Lockton. And it's really our purpose and our goal is to help drive and accelerate the pace of innovation across all of our clients. So, we recognize there's a tremendous amount of confusion and all of this change that is happening, both from regulatory forces as well as because of the cost factors that Danielle just spoke about. And really, the Insights and Innovation Lab is here to help you to better understand and assess those trends, to be able to assess and evaluate the vendors in the marketplace, to truly understand what they are doing to deliver more value to your program. And then on the back end, we're leveraging our InfoLock data in new ways to better understand how do we drive continuous improvement in those programs. So that's just a little bit about what the Insights and Innovation Lab is aiming to do. A little bit more about my background. So I've been in healthcare and health management for almost 30 years. And I've spent much of my career working in innovation, both at large health plans like United and Blue Cross Blue Shield. I've also worked in early stage companies in the wellness and disease management industry, as well as the navigation and advocacy solutions. So I've seen the industry from all sides, and I've spent 10 years really as a consultant leading strategic client relationships as well. So I bring to you, what I've read about and what I've seen happen over those 30 years. And one thing we know for sure is that these things go in cycles. So, what was interesting in the early days of my career around managed care, some of those same elements are coming back today. And we're really looking to how to apply that new thinking to some of those old ideas and really drive more value for your programs. So Paris, I'm going to bring up the slides and we can.
Yeah, and I would just invite people, tag some questions in the Q&A or drop them in the chat. I will watch for those and we can weave those into the conversation as well. Over to you.
Okay, just want to make sure the slides are.
Okay, I'll take my video off and we'll have, actually Paris might need me to make her able to share the screen. Okay, actually, I think she should be able to share. Oh, no, okay. There we go. Paris, you should have it.
Okay. Well, while we're getting started, while we're teeing up the slides, just wanted to ask you all a question about, how you think about your benefits programs and really your role in really leading change within your organization and driving new ideas and concepts. And so if you go to the next slide, Paris, really the focus of the conversation today is for you as benefit leaders to think about new ways that you can improve the employee experience and drive a better culture of health and well-being across your population by thinking differently, as we'll talk about today, by thinking more like a consumer marketer. So I think the first question is, what do you think about when you think about great marketing companies? What do they do really well that helps to sell the value of their goods and services? What makes for a great consumer experience? And how can we apply that same thinking to making a great employee experience? So I wanted to start with some concepts around consumer marketing because that's not our day job. But for most of you, it's foundational to really think differently about how we approach the communications campaigns, as well as how we design and deliver a very customized employee experience. So to begin with, if you think about just the level of expectation that our employees have today in the digital world, right? So they expect a very high level of customer experience when they're interacting with a company online. They want it to happen quickly. They want it to go smoothly with no hiccups. And compare that to the benefits experience today when it comes to connecting with your health plan or choosing a doctor or dealing with a claim issue. Those are things that as consumer marketers, we want certainly to go better and to deliver a better experience. So if you take today's environment and where we think the future is, all of the stakeholders, the health plans, the health systems need to think more about the customer, which is ultimately your employee. And so that really our focus today is to think about changing that experience to be something that's, delivers delight and makes it as easy as shopping on Amazon, right? Like that is our ultimate goal. So what is it about consumer marketing? Well, we're going to talk about what people really value, as well as how to connect to the emotional side of benefits. And most importantly, how do we overcome people's resistance to change? That's a big factor as well. So on the next slide, this is a framework that I've borrowed from Bain & Company, and they developed a lot of research for consumer marketing companies to really think about the elements of value. So when you think about what do your people value, what is most important to them, we're going to start with this broader construct of a framework that a marketer might use to describe the different elements of value when they're selling to consumers, right? And their goal is to generate more loyalty and to higher sustained revenue, right? But I think of this pyramid a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We have to get the foundational or the functional elements right in order to earn the privilege, really, to serve our employees to meet these higher order needs. So if you think about what some of those needs are, we have the functional elements of benefits are things like, just simplifying the experience, really connecting people to value, saving them time, saving them money. Those are things that your benefits program can do today, but how well are we describing that? How well are we selling that value? As well as, providing variety and a different set of experiences for different employee segments. We're going to talk a lot about that today. If we can solve for and deliver those functional elements a little bit better, then we earn the right, I think, to progress to those emotional needs. And that's where things like wellness programs and providing therapeutic value and helping people manage stress and anxiety, those are other elements that we can gain the trust of our employees to begin to solve with them together. And then at the highest levels, I think benefits really can deliver on truly life-changing and social impact. So, the role of benefits in terms of meeting employee needs, providing hope and motivation can best be described through telling stories. And we do that really well when we have examples of really amazing experiences that one or two employees may have had. And when we share that kind of value, it really helps others to see the benefits and the full value of your programs. So this is just a little bit of how a marketer might think about it, but let's talk a little bit more now about what your employees value specifically within your organization. So on the, before I do that, let's go into the next slide, Paris, sorry. I do want to talk about one other concept on the next slide about the resistance to change. So it's one thing to say, these are all the features and benefits that our program delivers. But the other challenge that we have is how do we overcome the employee resistance to new ideas? And so I found this great book and would highly recommend it as a way to think differently as a consumer marketer, to understand what those fundamental elements are that we need to overcome when introducing new ideas. So if you think about in these four quadrants, number one, what do great consumer marketers do to overcome the resistance to change? So by example, inertia is the first category. So if the experience represents kind of a change from what we're expected to do. So today, how do your employees search for information about their benefits plan? Do they go to Dr. Google and try to get information that way? Do they use their health plan site? Or do you have a single place to go where employees can find out more about their benefits, right? Really making it simple and making it a single pathway is one way to overcome that initial inertia and not ask people to make lots of change. The second thing is, how much effort does it actually take? And in the digital world, it's amazing to think that effort can be measured in terms of clicks, right? So sometimes just going one click more is too much effort for people to get access to the information that they need. And so we really need to design different experiences to make sure that that pathway is simple and easy and connects people to exactly what they need to know in as few steps as possible. And then you think about the emotional side of change. Do people feel threatened by it? Are we introducing something that's new and different and complex? Maybe it's a new plan design feature, or maybe it's a new offering to support chronic conditions or a new behavioral health solution. How do people feel about this change being offered to them? Do they feel like this is too big of a change and not something they want to pay attention to right now? Is it relevant? Is it useful? Or do people feel pressured to actually make a change? Maybe we're implementing an incentive, and sometimes incentives feel more like a stick. And so do they feel like this is something I'm being required to do, like an incentive for getting a second opinion? Sometimes feels like I'm being pressured to do that, and maybe I don't want to make that kind of change. So when we think about how we implement and communicate, we need to address not just the features and benefits or the functional and foundational elements of value, but we also need to think about people's resistance to change and how do we design our strategies differently. So with that, let's talk a little bit more on the next slide about what employees value. So we've been talking a lot about the hypothetical in the consumer experience, but there are ways to think about unique needs that your employees have. And often they segment around different life stages or career stages. And so this is just some research that we've assembled, and we have lots of great tools to get at, deeper benchmarking information. But if you think about on one end of the spectrum, if we have lower wage, entry level employees, what's most important to them? Why are they staying and why are they leaving? Often it's for, minimal compensation change could get them to move across the street to another job. Whereas our more seasoned professionals are looking for a complete total rewards value proposition. Combines the compensation and the benefits package and retirement and time off, plus really having a great employee experience as part of that flexibility and career growth opportunities and company culture. So we need to have tools and mechanisms to really assess what employees value so that we can think differently about how we design and deliver our programs to speak to the individualized needs of each of these employee populations. So on the next slide, just a quick note on what a lot of folks have been talking about is the Great Resignation. And I thought this research from McKinsey was helpful because when we're really trying to understand why people are leaving in this era over the last 2 to 3 years, and in this case, the survey is focused on why people are leaving without another job in hand. It's interesting that compensation package is in there, but those are not the highest order reasons why people are leaving. And in fact, just above compensation is a lack of support for employee health and well-being. That means that we as benefit leaders really have a role to play in helping to just, to create reasons for people to stay, for them to feel included and to belong to the organization by making those emotional connections to the benefits that we deliver. The other issues that I've highlighted here around workplace flexibility, as well as providing a more inclusive and welcoming environment. Those are all ways that I think benefits can show up differently and help to create greater retention in your organization as well. So let's go to the next slide. And one of the ways that a consumer marketer would think about designing their communications messages is through market segmentation, right? There's a lot of research around, how do we understand different needs of different segments? And in the employee benefits experience, we have ways of doing that as well. So at Lockton, we have lots of tools to deliver the market insights and benchmarking to understand at a high level what employees value. And what you see here is an array of what we'd call a workforce needs comparison. So we think about, that early career worker, Sam. He's new to the workforce. Maybe he's married, but doesn't have children right now, but he has some student debt. So what are the programs that would best suit Sam's needs compared to Joe, who's more mid-career and has a family and has other needs around saving for retirement and may want to allocate resources differently. And then Mary, a senior executive in the organization who is really focused on personal development and spending more time with her grandkids. And what does her package of benefits need to look like to best fit those needs? So one of the ways we think about this is using data to understand the demographics as well as the geographics of your population, and to bring in other areas of research like employee sentiment analysis or other types of survey instruments to really begin to understand what are the key needs and what do employees value most, because we want to allocate as much spend as possible to things that employees truly value. And I think, as Daniela was alluding to earlier, healthcare costs are consuming more and more of that value proposition. So how can we, deliver higher order benefits and things that employees value without, by better managing the cost of healthcare? Because I think healthcare is the biggest cost driver that is also taking away wage growth, right? So the real impact here is, how do we begin to shrink the healthcare pie so we can invest in and solve for some of these greater needs that our employees have? So with that, let's talk a little bit about those 4 big ideas that Danielle alluded to. So here's how we can think about it, using that same framework of let's fix the foundational elements first. Let's really simplify our approach to benefits and focus on those things that employees value and bring more appreciation to the value of those existing elements in our benefit program. And another way we can do that is by serving the needs of these unique segments of the population, by cultivating more variety in our programs and delivering different types of experiences to meet people where they're at in their career stage. And then a third area that we're going to talk about today is really, how do we focus on those emotional components and really design and deliver a culture of well-being that is a unique employee experience that only you can deliver. And then the fourth area is really, how do we show that transformational, life-changing impact that your benefit programs can deliver? Because we know that employees are connected to the purpose and the mission of the business, are often more loyal, and are more likely to be satisfied with the full package, total rewards package that they receive from their employer. So we're going to dive into each of these 4 ideas quickly, and then take time for any questions that you may have at the end. So the first category is really simplification, right? If we think about the foundational elements from that pyramid, we want to focus on things that help people save time, really simplify their life, reduce the amount of effort that it takes to get the information they need, minimize or reduce hassles, provide savings and reduce cost, really organize their benefits in a way that makes it easy to understand and access, and integrate across all of the different program components that you may offer. And so one strategy that we see employers using effectively is really designing and delivering a front door to benefits. And so I'll give you an example of a major food market chain that realized as they did some analysis on their own employee portal that the number one page that people were viewing was for their time card. So, large hourly workforce, the one place they had to go every day was to make sure that their time card entry was correctly entered into this web page. So what did they decide to do? They said, we want everything that leads from the time card page to be one click away so that people would have access to health and well-being information and would have access to all of the great resources that we're delivering. And they can't be more than one click away from that time card page, because that's where we know people are going. We want to take advantage of the inertia of that initial experience. And then we want to make it minimal effort to go from I'm checking my time card to how am I learning about my benefits? Maybe I have a question, or I didn't know that some of these resources were available to me. So the other ways that employers are designing and delivering this front door experience is using either advocacy and navigation vendors as a carve out, or perhaps an integrated part of your health plan delivery. And really the two main functions of that front door is to connect you quickly based on these higher order needs. And one is clinical decision support. And so that could be things like virtual primary care or expert opinions or care management and case management solutions. But all of those things fit into that category of I have a medical need, I need a symptom checker, I need access to information to know where to go to get the right care. And if we can design and deliver that experience in a way that makes it really easy to connect people to value, then we have a better chance of solving for that cost and quality equation, right? As Danielle spoke about, the healthcare cost inflation continues to increase, and we need to make sure that employees are making well-informed choices, not only about where to go and what it costs, but whether or not the care is appropriate. There's a tremendous amount of waste in the system that we can avoid if we design a better experience. On the other side, the other main question that people are asking is, I've got this problem to solve, right? I've got a claim issue. I don't know where to go or who to talk to. And really making that concierge experience where somebody can research the issue with my provider, research it with the health plan, and come back to me with the answer, right? And hopefully that saves me a lot of time, saves me money, finds better solutions to best meet my needs. So those are just a couple of quick examples of how employers are really trying to solve for that foundational functional level. But on the next slide, another example of sort of a foundational element that we talked about is how do we cultivate more variety in the benefits experience? And so this is when we were thinking about what employees value and thinking about them differently through the use of the workforce personas as an example. And what I'm showing you here is just a brief example of an InfoLock report that helps to understand different life stages and what percentage of your population is enrolled in your benefit plan that are in each of these different life stages. So if we have access to this type of information, and here we're spotlighting the sandwich generation, and those are folks who are typically in that 40 to 59 years of age, where they have both young children or teenage children, as well as a 65 or older parent. And they're dealing with caregiving issues on both ends. So where you need to think about your talent value equation, one, we may be hiring and trying to attract more young workers who are those emerging dependent caregivers, and we're trying to attract them with enhanced fertility benefits and things that support, building families. We also need to think about the existing segment of our workforce that is in that sandwich generation and has a different set of caregiving needs, maybe to take care of an older parent. So we can look for vendors and solutions that can deliver on both ends of the spectrum rather than just focusing on one particular component. Another way that leading employers are really thinking about providing more flexibility and individualized options is through things like lifestyle accounts or voluntary benefits and other types of perk options. But the lifestyle account is really a way to address that need where the employer says, I'm going to allocate a stipend, an account that you can use in the following areas. And it will allow for both the person in the sandwich generation maybe to purchase additional care and support that they need for their family. And those dollars could be used very differently for somebody in the emerging dependent caregiver segment of the population. And to the employer, it's the same account. And these types of accounts can work both domestically as well as globally, with lots of variability around currency and local cost of living that could be factored in as well. So these are just some ways to think about delivering a different employee experience that promotes more flexibility and more personalized options. So on the next slide, let's talk about that third strategy, which is really connecting to the emotional components. And I think the way that employers are solving for the emotional component within their health and benefits programs is through this notion of building a culture of well-being. And so remember, when we talked about those higher order needs around wellness and therapeutic value, it's also about delivering fun and entertainment value, providing rewards and incentives, and also dealing with individual anxiety, stress, and other types of needs. So our framework here, as we think about the foundational elements of a really good culture of well-being program, it starts with understanding what employees' needs are, and then really thinking through what the employer delivery needs to look like to meet those needs. So from the category of career well-being, we can think about what each life stage, which each individual within each life stage needs in terms of their own personal growth and enrichment. And what does that mean in terms of different learning styles, different types of flexibility and other programs that enable people to really grow as an individual and increase their productivity as a worker. The second area is around community well-being. And so what we see there are, providing support for relationships within both at work and also in the community, making it much more local and making things relevant locally as well. Another area of focus, we see a strong need, especially in the current economic and climate today, is really supporting people's financial well-being. And we know that financial security is an issue at every stage, but the needs again vary in terms of resources to support retirement planning versus day-to-day budgeting and everything in between. And then in terms of the way we've typically thought about well-being is really around physical health, right? But if we broaden that to a more holistic view of personal and self well-being, we begin to address more of not just the physical components, but also the emotional health components. We're going to spend a lot more time talking about that later today. But this is really providing a support for a broad set of needs and making sure that your programs, reflect that diversity in your population as well. I think only when people, can function on all four of these levels can we really help them realize their personal potential and really help them drive our business results as well. And so the final area that I just wanted to touch on briefly is to think about how your benefits experience really can change people's lives. And there's so much going on given the past 2 years of the pandemic and everything that's happening in the world around us, that companies really need to think differently about the experience that you're delivering, creating that connection, that affiliation and belonging to the organization that really helps to drive positive purpose. And so if we think about programs that are really focused around purpose, a lot of our employee resource groups, can bring great ideas back to your program and suggest ways to better personalize and deliver, individualized experience that best meets the needs of these diverse workforce groups. We think about the social well-being components, or even how we can use things like rewards and recognition programs differently to align with those needs, allocating more volunteer time for local initiatives that support that, really that social and community connectivity, and aligning our charitable giving to really help people feel connected to the investments that the company is making really in the community and in the overall making the world better through these charitable purposes as well. So I think if we're able to think differently and act a little bit more proactively in telling stories to connect people to how we're making an impact on people's lives. And that's so much of the reason why we've pivoted to this description of people solutions, because we think that we really have a responsibility to make people's lives better through the programs and services that we deliver. So with that, Danielle, I'm going to take a pause. I've been talking for a bit and see if you have any questions.
Well, I'll take a peek at the Q&A and the chat here. I did have a couple of questions. One thing too that I wanted to say, Michael, I really appreciate your comments too around how we help people adapt to change. And that really is built on this idea of trust between an employer and an employee. I feel like that's a fairly new idea, right? Especially in light of the last 6 to 9 months when hiring has changed and what people want changes. I really think if we think about how we build trust as employers with employees, that's likely a huge game changer. So some of the things too that you talked about, specifically, you talked about, this biggest cost driver that's taking away from wage growth is healthcare. How can we deliver better value? Do you have a couple of ideas for our group today on what that can look like?
Yeah, it's such an important topic, Danielle, and one we could spend another hour talking about, but I'll just give you a couple of ideas. It really comes down to 3 things. One is price. We think about the price that we're paying and predominantly what we're overpaying for healthcare services today. And so that there's a lot of new data that is available now because of the transparency regulations that allows us to better understand the price of care. And so if you're not getting access to your data today, the first thing we can do is require that your health plans are providing you with full disclosure on not just the charge, but the allowed amount and the paid amount for all of those claims. And what we're then able to do is say there may be more cost-efficient ways to deliver that same level of care at a lower price. That's number one. Number two, it's about the appropriateness of care. So there's a lot of data that suggests there's more than 30% of healthcare dollars are wasted, right? And I'll use a marketing analogy that we know that 50% of marketing dollars are wasted. We just don't know which 50%, right? I think in healthcare we actually can find the 30% of waste, and it's right in front of us. And that's where things like expert opinions and better consumer healthcare decision-making tools can help to avoid unnecessary care, right? So if we look at those types of strategies that really improve clinical decision-making, we can avoid some of that waste in the system. That's absolutely it. And then, I think the third thing we have to do is expect more from our vendors. So, driving performance improvement, driving expectations. If we think about, one particular high cost area is pharmacy benefits. How can we change that level of expectation around the transparency and the cost of pharmacy? and really demand the information to know what is the actual cost of that drug. That's just another way that we need to, dig deeper and understand truly what we're paying for, and is it delivering the level of value we believe.
Which really leads into the next question, which is, part of your role in the Innovation and Insights Lab is vetting vendors and solutions. And as you are doing that, I guess two-pronged question: who do you see as being really value-heavy disruptors in the vendor space? And then can you get specific in mental health?
Okay. So, the value-added players, I think are, where the innovation is coming from. We've seen, just billions of dollars invested in digital health. And I think things like virtual care and new virtual clinics essentially are ways to deliver care that is both, a better experience as well as better value, right? So there are lots of innovators in that space. We're seeing lots of interest in more accountable care organizations or virtual primary care, connecting people to value. And I think, taking that page from what's old is new again, for a long time, things like on-site health were focal points for, getting people access to high quality care and high quality primary care. We're beginning to see that now come about again, both in terms of near-site solutions as well as virtual care solutions. And that is, if that is the starting point, or if that is your front door to healthcare, that is a way to unlock more value. The second area you talked about, and I think it's analogous to this, is mental health. And so much of, the mental health issue in the past was around overcoming stigma. I think we're getting past that part. I think what we now have is an access issue. And the access issue is because there just haven't been enough high quality providers that are willing to be in network with the health plan. And where we've seen the most disruptive innovation come from in this space is really these new digital health solutions that provide care and triage essentially to appropriate levels of care. So they're combining things like digital interventions that deal with stress and anxiety at a moderate or low degree, all the way up to EAP and catastrophic care and support. But they're doing it by providing a better, more convenient access to care. So by using basically intake and triage tools, intake teams, companies like Lyra, Spring Health, Modern Healthcare, are doing it differently, and they're helping to assess, appropriate treatment and then connect people immediately to care providers who traditionally wouldn't have been in the network. And I think it's through those types of connections, scheduling, making it easier, and expanding network access that we're trying to solve for that significant behavioral health need that we have across all employee populations.
Access, you hit it on the head, right? We have legislated the heck out of making benefits available, requiring that benefits be available, and how fast they need to be available, how fast a claim needs to be paid, all of those kinds of things. But you cannot legislate providers to be in the network. You can't legislate people to want to go to college and become a counselor.
That's another issue.
Right? It's so much deeper than just having it in your benefit plan. And I think we are all experiencing that and have been for quite some time. Well, I don't see any other questions that have popped up in chat or Q&A. You're a quiet group this morning. I would encourage you to send along some questions, and of course, connecting with Michael via LinkedIn, or even funneling some questions through one of us here on your Washington Locked-In team is great. Feel free to do that. You also mentioned the human element. And as we were preparing for this, I actually picked up the book myself, and I would really like to make that book available to those who joined today. So as a follow-up, I'll be asking you where you'd like that book mailed. And I picked it up myself, of course, to read it. And if you'd like to book club this with me, I think there's probably a lot of application even outside the workplace that
Love
we could apply. So, book club, whether it be coffee or wine, I'm open for either of those, but I'm excited to read
Love
the
to
book.
join that book club, Danielle. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'd love that. I appreciate your perspective and your time this morning, and I expect that we'll have some, extra questions for you, and look forward to hearing some of those others who are in that space of providing value and doing something to help our employers deliver something different, because we got to do it different. The old ways not working anymore, and I don't think it's a blip on the radar. It's going to be an ongoing thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So now to another kind of engagement. And, I confess here that this conversation is really close to my heart, right? We all know someone. We all know someone who was or is struggling with substance abuse, with a mental health issue, someone who maybe ended up incarcerated from one or more of those things. But and I should call them conditions. They're not things, they are conditions. But for people who step forward and get help, or they have served their time, they've paid their debt to society, how do we restore them to employment? How do we help those in the midst of, say, an outpatient treatment program get care and also get work? How do we help someone make a living and become, that contributing member of their society after they've been incarcerated, if we won't give them opportunities to work? So there are legal considerations, of course, but there are training opportunities and ethical and moral questions too about what is right. So our panel is going to dive in to these topics and maybe more. We'll see where the conversations go. There's a lot of passion around this. And because we know that COVID has really opened up the door for more people seeking help and more people coming back to work who are asking for help. Maybe they were struggling before, and through COVID, that struggle has increased. And as we talk about this normal thing, there are a lot of people struggling with what is normal, and how do we get back to that, and how do I get life back under control if I've been abusing some substances. So we're going to cover a wide range, but our hope here is to equip all of you with some ideas about how to make your workplace more friendly for those who need another opportunity. They need a fair chance, as Mary Cranny likes to say. Our panel, I'm excited to introduce them to all of you. And would you all introduce yourselves? And as you do, tell us why this topic matters to you. Can we start with you, Ty?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. My name is Ty Reed. I am the founder and executive director of Recovery Career Services, a local nonprofit that is focused on providing employment guidance and support for individuals that are in recovery from addiction, homelessness, and past criminal justice involvement. It's really important to me because I was once mired in all three of those. I spent a couple of years homeless on the streets of Seattle as a drug addict and alcoholic, in and out of jail multiple times, was even committed to a mental institution for a time, and was lucky enough to survive those trials and tribulations and get sober in 2016. And now I feel really lucky to be able to use my time and my energy to help others who may be walking that same path. Glad to be here today. Thank you.
We're glad you're here. Mary?
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Cranny. I've been the HR manager at Pallet Shelter and Square Peg Development for going on 4 years. Also Weld Seattle. We have 3 companies. Pallet Shelter, pretty much 80% of their the staff that we hire are fair chance employees that to us means those coming out of the criminal system, those who have had a history of drugs and alcohol, and anyone who's been homeless. This has been our model since our company started in 2014, and we absolutely love it, and we love to sell it to others. There are so many people out there that are very excellent employees that just need someone to give them a chance. This one door does not close on them. So that's my history with them. I do not have a history of any of those three, other than the fact that I have been touched by it, having formerly been married to a felon, and there was a lot of chaos in the family. So it is near and dear to my heart, and I just love giving people a chance.
Good. Thanks for coming here to share that with us.
Mhm.
Alex? Unmute. There we go. Wait a minute. There
Trying
you
to
go.
keep muted because my dog is constantly growling and barking at things, and I don't want anybody to have to hear that. So I'm Alex Higgins. I'm an employment lawyer in Seattle. I've been doing this for over 25 years now. I represent both employers and employees. This topic is really important to me because it's a matter of a fundamentally decent society that helps people, gives them second chances, lifts them up. And that it's a matter of social justice, and it's a really important matter of social justice. And I think that companies and individuals within companies all want to do this and do the right thing. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel today to talk about that and how to facilitate that.
Well, I appreciate all of your willingness to come and share, and to the desire that as many people hear this message and have the option to ask questions as possible. You know, not only is it an issue that we're seeing of those among us, that people are struggling and need those chances. On the other side, you know, we have employers who are talking about they can't find people to hire. So perhaps meeting in the middle of that, if there are employers who would consider doing this when maybe in the past they didn't, maybe there are some ways that we can help bridge some of those gaps. So again, we'll invite you to drop in some questions as we move through this. We will, toward the end too, we can unmute if people would like to speak up. But our first question for the panel, if employers are considering a fair or second chance hiring, what are some changes that they're going to need to make to their current hiring practice? Who wants to start on that?
I'll go ahead and start on that. I would say that the first thing that an employer would need to do is actually look at your job postings. Are you putting things in your job postings that are kind of unrealistic? Are you asking for people to have 2 or 3 years experience for an entry-level job? Because if that's the case, you're likely eliminating a significant chunk of the population. If you have an applicant tracking system, is your applicant tracking system tuned so that's going to kick out resumes that don't have a certain level of experience? Because if so, you're likely limiting yourself and the number and the types of applicants that you're seeing. And then I've got a lot on this, but the final thing I say is, I think you should take a look at all the positions that you have available in your company. Is it necessary for every single position to have the exact same background check requirement, right? So does the background check requirement for the person that's working as your accountant, does that need to be the same background check requirement for somebody who might be working in sales or as a warehouse person or something like that? Because probably not. And if that's the case, then there's likely an opportunity for you to create an additional avenue to employment with your organization for somebody that you might not have thought about before.
Okay, Mary or Alex, anything to add to that?
Well, honestly, Ty hit every single point. There's not much more I can add to that other than buy-in. It's very important to educate your managers and anybody that's interviewing to watch for those conscious and unconscious biases.
Yeah.
And I would just add that it's illegal in many states, including Washington, to ask about criminal convictions pre offer. I mean, you can do it after, but if you're screening applicants out on that basis, you're violating the Fair Chance Act in Washington. So that's another consideration there.
Mhm.
Tread carefully, right? So, Ty, let's start with you too on this question. I think it's important because, like I mentioned, at the beginning, we all know someone. Depending on our personal experiences, we might not want to think about that person that we know and our personal experience with it when we're thinking about fair chance hiring or helping someone who's going through a treatment program, at our workplace, because some of us have bad experiences and some of us have good experiences, right? We have a person who has a story of redemption, and in other cases, that's not it. So to that end, what are some of the bias that we need to overcome from your experience when we're thinking about hiring, when we're thinking about our workplace?
Well, I think the bias that we all suffer from, whether it's in hiring or just in life in general, is otherism, right? If someone has a life experience that is unfamiliar to me, it's very easy to color them as the other or something that we don't understand and kind of leave someone out of a process. So but the only way to really overcome that is information. So often when employers go through the hiring process, and speaking as someone with criminal convictions who's kind of gone through the process a bit as far as trying to find work, it kind of all looks the same for us. So we go to an interview, employer kind of likes us, they run a background check, all of a sudden the conversation changes. Now it's not a conversation about our experience and how we're going to fit into the position. It's now a conversation about what went on in your background, how long ago did it happen? And then the employer starting to make some sort of evaluation about if they're a good employer, about how they might be able to make it work. If they're like most employers, about how it's about how they can get that candidate out of their office as quickly as possible, unfortunately. But if folks just kind of slow down a little bit and ask a few questions, you may learn some things. And the biggest question is, what's been happening in your life since all that stuff happened? So that's the biggest way to kind of overcome some of that bias, because somebody might tell you a story that's kind of interesting. If they tell you that, they've done a bunch of volunteering, or that they're in recovery now and they work with a sponsor or something similar to that, it becomes pretty evident that folks are trying to live their life in a different way. And that is the top way to kind of overcome those biases. But until people decide to kind of slow down a little bit and actually ask a couple of questions, it's not going to change the experience that a lot of job seekers are having.
Mary, Alex?
Gosh, I mean, Ty's so good at this. You just know, you've been there and you know what it's like. And look at Ty right now. I mean, this is the caliber right here that I get to see every single day. No, I have nothing more to add to that. That's just beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a quick thing to add, and that is a bias that I just thought of as Ty was talking, is the bias that you might have as a manager or an HR person, that this person is going to be a pain in the butt because they're going to go out on leave. They're going to tell me about this, that. They're going to ask for special accommodations. They're going to, oh boy, this one employee is going to take up 90% of my time compared to the other employees. And I think that's a bias that, it's a bias because it happens. In terms of HR people do get swamped by the difficult employee who's constantly, but don't assume that because somebody had a difficult past that is going to follow them into the future. You might find that they're a person who is more determined to be the model employee than someone else. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I think that's a really great observation. Mary, what's your experience been with 80% of your population? Do you have more leave requests? Do you have more people that need more of your time because they need accommodation? Share with us.
No, we do not. I think that's the key. I mean, what Alex just said, it's an unrealistic fear. We find there's a lot more loyalty. We find that clearly in our case, since we have so many fair chance employees, They help one another, so that's also very good. But it's extremely important to us that we do a lot of training. Shame has just got to go, and it's very easy. All of us there's a piece of us that likes to find fault with others, and we just need to be careful not to use somebody's past against them. It's all about their potential. And if you see potential in people, you don't really care about what they've been through. We all come with baggage. It doesn't matter if you've been imprisoned or not. I mean, we all have secrets. We all have those closed doors. We all have our wish we hadn't done it list, but that does not reflect on who we might become. And I think when an employer trusts and their employees and looks forward to what they can bring to the company, you get it.
Well,
None of us want to be judged based on those past things, right?
No.
Well, and I think Mary would probably echo this as well, is, I think the great news for HR professionals that work at companies that don't currently hire from this population is you can get a great candidate from this population. You can also get a bad candidate from this population. No different than hiring off of Indeed or off Craigslist or off LinkedIn. There is not only one type of candidate in this pool, and it's a big pool. In Washington State, there's about 2 million adults that have criminal convictions. So it's a very deep and broad pool of folks that you get to choose from. And if you're not considering hiring from these folks, you're kind of leaving yourself out of some opportunity.
Yeah, it's true, right? It's you don't know really what you're going to get no matter the population. I heard a story last week about, an HR leader who was being very, conscientious through the process of being understanding about a person's abilities and what their availability was for certain parts of onboarding, and they accept the job. And we hear this story a lot. They accepted the job and then they didn't show up. So, right. And as far as I know, there wasn't a background check that, would have said that person may or may not be, the one to ghost a new job. But it's true. HR people are really struggling through this. So perhaps broadening that net is not nearly as scary. What else should employers know about hiring people who've been previously involved with the criminal justice system?
Mary, do you want to tackle this one first?
Well, what else should they know? I mean, like Alex said, the background shouldn't come into play. It's the skills that they bring to you. So you advertise for a manufacturing position, you want to know if they've ever used power tools, if they've ever been in an environment of manufacturing. You don't have to address what they've come from. Generally, it does come out that someone is either in recovery or they've been out of prison for so long, but they still have court dates. And we have to know about those things because we would have to make allowances for those absences. So those things are very important, but an HR professional is hiring someone for the job. This is a win-win. It's not a charity. So you do have to get the job done.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, I just was going to say, we also make allowances for people with medical conditions or childcare issues. It's really the same. You have an obligation, we'll make allowances for it if you fit the bill, if we want you and if you want us. The interview goes both ways. So I think that it's just important to remember that people have lives outside of you.
Mm-hmm. I do think there are legal risks, if I can segue into that we have to be realistic about. That if you're hiring someone just released from prison for a series of violent crimes, you don't need to just turn a blind eye to that and say, oh, well, I got to give this person a second chance. I mean, because there is liability potentially for negligent hiring under that circumstance. And that all really depends on a lot of things, though. So how long ago was the crime, the nature of the crime. I mean, the EEOC has guidelines on how excluding people based on a criminal conviction can be discrimination because of the disproportionality of convictions on the part of minorities. But then it gives some great guidance for employers on, okay, you don't have to hire anybody, with any criminal background, but you should take into account these different kinds of factors. The nature of the crime, how long ago it was, evidence of rehabilitation, personal references, character references. So there does require sometimes a bit more work than just, do you meet the qualifications of the job? The other thing that to keep in mind is how much liability really is there if this person is not going to the home of some vulnerable person, where you're sending them out into the world where, worst case scenario, they could do some horrible thing to somebody. So if you're hiring someone to work in a busy retail store as a clerk, there's very little opportunity for that person to do anything, to do any harm. I think it's a complicated issue, and I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to gloss over the fact that it can be a difficult decision sometimes to take a chance on somebody, and you should get legal advice on, are we exposed here to any kind of a claim if worst case scenario happens?
Yeah,
I would just like, oh, I'm sorry, Ty.
No, go ahead,
I want to just say one thing, and I agree with everything you said, Alex. However, there's this assumption that they will reoffend again. And that's where we have to be very careful as HR professionals. If the time has been done and they've paid their dues, we need to be careful not to assume they're going to do a crime again. There are laws that we have to abide by in terms of if you're registered, say, if you're a registered sex offender, you can't work within so many feet of a school or whatever. And it is a safety net. It really helps us to then, guide where we place people. People who have, I don't know, it goes on and on. There's lots of crimes that you wouldn't put into certain positions. And Ty brought that up earlier. You might have to match the background with the job that you're applying for. And so that is our safety net. But the assumption that they will probably reoffend, that's a conversation that you got to have with your company. You don't want to make assumptions. They've already paid their dues. So let's give them a fair chance to now not fall back into drugs and alcohol or crime or whatever. And I think that's what society keeps from people in this demographic, is that freedom to now get it right. I've never seen a lawsuit. So, and I've been doing this for a while. It's such a rarity that would ever come up.
I would agree that it's rare, but I don't think it's wise to completely ignore the possibility, however remote.
Okay.
got it. I appreciate you both bringing both those things up. I just want to add a couple things. So number one, I think it's important that employers know that this is hiring from these populations is not about charity. This is actually an even exchange of value. So no one here is suggesting that you hire someone who's unqualified for the job simply because you feel like getting the warm and fuzzies and giving them a second chance or feeling good about doing something. We're talking about a candidate who's actually qualified, and you like them at the interview, you like them on the resume, but then you pull their background check and you like them a little less. What we're talking about is evaluating those folks for what they can actually bring to the company, because there's going to be an exchange. They're going to bring their enthusiasm and their experience and their, frankly, desire to have a better life for themselves in many cases. And they're going to get some stuff from you too. They're going to get money and they're going to get benefits and hopefully an opportunity to advance their career. And then I just want to present one thing that is counterintuitive that a lot of hiring folks don't think about. Quite often, the best employees that you'll ever have will be people that are on probation or on parole. And the reason why is because if they reoffend, they're going right back into the system. So it may be, again, it's counterintuitive to think about, but you want to talk about an employee who's got motivation to show up and do their job and be successful. Folks that still have some sort of conditions that are hanging over their head can often be really great employees. And I think Mary would probably echo that.
In this exchange that you talk about, because I do think it's important to emphasize, we can't save anybody. This isn't charity. There is a need, and there are qualified people who need someone to just give them that opportunity, right? Give them that chance. There are some programs and incentives too that employers can take advantage of, specifically when hiring people with past criminal convictions. And there might be some folks on here today who aren't familiar with that. Mary and Ty, I know you both can speak about those. Would one of you run with that?
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, yeah, we've got the work opportunity credit, which is huge. We do take advantage of that. That applies to those who have been incarcerated or those are veterans. You get a tax break. There's state workforce subsidies that you can tap into. There's the federal bonding program that you can tap into. And then Ty, I think you know of others as well, right?
Well, yeah, so I'm going to speak on this federal bonding program for just a second. So it is basically an insurance bond, up to $25,000, zero deductible, zero cost. Anytime that you can put this on any employee, but this is mostly used for employers that have a concern about maybe hiring somebody that has past criminal justice involvement, and it protects against employee dishonesty or any bad conduct both on the job and off the job. And in Washington State since 2017, I think the number is it's somewhere between 300 and 400 of these bonds have been applied for. They've never had to pay out one claim, not one. So again, free, zero cost, zero deductible, and those claims haven't really been paid out. But this kind of helps lower the risk that some employers might be thinking about taking on if they hire somebody who has some past criminal justice involvement. And Mary mentioned some state and federal kind of workforce development programs. There are, I also have some experience working in the workforce development arena, and there are a number of programs that kind of provide an incentive. I hate to say a bribe, but they kind of bribe employers with dollars. So there are programs that will pay for the wages of a temporary or permanent worker for a period of time. So if you're considering a candidate that maybe you're not sure under normal circumstances that you would bring into the company because maybe you have some reservations about them, these programs will basically pay their wages for a period of time and almost give you the opportunity to try them before you buy them. So it's similar to the relationship you might have with a staffing agency, except it doesn't cost you a dime. As a matter of fact, it pays their wages for you and gives you an opportunity to kind of evaluate some folks that maybe are looking for a chance to get their foot in the door somewhere. And so it's good for the employee, and it's good for the employer as well.
More things to help mitigate the risk and help ease some concerns that employers might have, which also does circle back to something we talked a lot about in the preparation, which is answering the question, is fear bigger than the reality?
Yes. I mean, yes, it's way out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the fears are kind of nonsensical in a way, because we just build up in our brain, this person's done this, therefore they're going to do it again, without considering the dues have been paid, they're sincere, they really want back in, and just the human piece, they've had a lot of doors closed. So yeah, labeling is a big issue. Again, training your staff to not go there is really important. These biases, conscious and unconscious, we have to train better to mitigate some of these fears or barriers that we have in us. The lack of education or past employment is a big one. That's how people hire. And it's just been tradition. We hire based on a resume. Well, that is changing employers are looking for teams. So they're looking more for those with, strategic tendencies or connectors or innovators or whatever to fill a network, a team. So education isn't as important, neither is job experience. You can generally teach people how to do a job, but they come as they are, and that may be just what you want on that team. So hiring practices and interviewing is becoming a little different for some of the largest companies in the nation. So I think that we need to look at not somebody's past, and I mean that means all of our past, as much as kind of who they are as an individual.
So what should employers really fear? Alex, let's start with you.
My mic on or?
Yeah.
Yep.
On. Okay, good. Well, I mean, like I said before, I think the negligent hiring issue is the only thing to really address. And I think we've all pointed out that it's a remote risk, but it's still worth checking on. I also think, as I pointed out, discriminating against people based on a criminal conviction is also something that you have to be careful about and not just assume that they're going to be recidivists or dangerous. And so you have to balance between those two. And then we haven't touched on this, but there's also people in recovery, people who have a mental health issue, who obviously are protected by disability discrimination laws, the ADA and so forth. And so this is an area that, like many areas for HR people, requires a great deal of expertise and knowledge of the various discrimination laws and making sure that you're being careful not to make decisions based on assumptions and biases.
Yeah. Ty, you had some good commentary around this space as well.
Well, it's fear is a really interesting thing. So I don't know that employers really realize how big a role that they have to play in the quality of what happens in our community. So a couple of things. So according to the Prison Policy Initiative, the number one reason why people reoffend and go back into the system is poverty. So everybody's got financial realities, right? So everybody's got to eat, everybody got to pay rent to live somewhere. So if people are not given fair opportunities at employment, then it actually makes our communities, kind of worse. Never mind the fact that, as Mary's kind of talked about, it's kind of an equity issue, right? Once people have paid their debt to society, why should they then be further sentenced to poverty? Which and that poverty leads to all types of unfortunate outcomes in the community, right? We have people who aren't able to pay into the tax base for the community. So the community is less protected and not as safe as it might be. We have increased homelessness and increased crime and increased poverty in general. So employment really has a large role to play in the lives, not only of these applicants, but in the quality of the community that these businesses find themselves in. And fear, unfortunately, has a lot to do with why folks aren't getting opportunity. And only until we take the time to, inspect our policies and inspect our biases are we going to be able to, kind of address these things. The other thing, and I'll just say this briefly, that kind of has to do with fear is so often I think employers are worried about, putting the wrong person in the wrong place. So kind of something that Mary talked about, right? You hire somebody that has a particular background and then you put them in a position that doesn't set them up for success. It kind of sets them up for failure. And there is such a thing as right person, right job. And we've kind of alluded to it. You wouldn't want to have an embezzler be your accountant. You probably wouldn't want somebody that's got 5 DUIs to be your delivery truck driver, right? So, but that person with 5 DUIs might be able to work somewhere else in the company. And there's a great distance between, if you have a policy now that basically says, we don't hire anybody with criminal convictions for the last 5 years, we don't hire them at all, to hiring everybody that comes through the door. What we're talking about are having policies that fall somewhere in between and allow you to create some additional opportunity while still maintaining a culture that you're comfortable with in your company.
One of the other things that you talk about too is helping employers have a process. If you're going to hire and be open to this, can you speak about a process and what you like to call your case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I know for a fact that there are HR people on here right now who work in companies that say, well, we hire those folks on a case-by-case basis. And frankly, case-by-case terrifies me. The reason why is because what case-by-case typically says to me is that you don't actually have a process in place, a formal process that says, this is the criteria that we use to evaluate folks. So often case-by-case comes down to gut feel, usually of just one person, not a couple of people. So now we don't have someone balancing the decision process. And so often it is just so kind of fly by the seat of our pants. And what I'm saying is that for the protection of not only the candidate and for the employer, there should be some kind of process in place that, so if anyone ever files one of the discrimination lawsuits that Alex is talking about and feels like they weren't hired because of a criteria that was specific to them, that the company can then say, well, actually, we've got this process in place that we use, and here's the criteria that we use, and here's the thought process that we followed. And an example of that is something that we're actually going to share with you after this is I recommend a scorecard. And it is similarly to the way that many companies will use scorecards in evaluating applicants in general. Once you identify an applicant that has some sort of criminal convictions in their background, you actually have a scorecard that helps you evaluate what criteria they can meet in order to be eligible for hire. So some of it is the stuff that Alex is talking about. How long ago did the crime happen? What was the nature of the crime? Does it have anything to do with the job that they're applying for? But there's also other criteria. Do they actually already have work experience related to this, which you can kind of get from the resume? Did they provide you with letters of recommendation that you can actually verify? Because if that's the case, that's a pretty powerful endorsement of somebody that says that maybe this is somebody you should take a chance on. Were they referred to you by a current or former employee? Well, that's kind of a big deal. That might be somebody that maybe gets a couple of extra points. And so there's some other criteria also that you can kind of use to determine if this is somebody that is worth offering an opportunity now. And the beautiful thing about it is you're not saying no forever, you're saying no for now. So maybe the person doesn't have enough job experience. Maybe they don't have letters of recommendation. Maybe they've only been out of, this crime happened a year ago, but you'd like to see it happen 2 years ago. What that says is at some point in the future, they can come back and be eligible for hire. They're just not eligible for hire now. So it gives you this really uniform set of criteria and process to use as you're evaluating these particular candidates.
Okay, anything else to add, Alex or Mary? Okay. So let's transition a little bit because I want to be sure. I know we're getting really close on time here for folks who have joined us. But I think this is really important and timely because, again, we're hearing it a lot on the benefit side, right? We need people, people are asking, how do we access this? What benefits do we have that are available for people who are asking for, treatment or assessments? Again, due to the pandemic, we're seeing more current employees or their dependents trying to overcome a drug or alcohol issue. What advice do you have for employers in creating that environment where employees feel comfortable asking for help? Stigma, stigma, stigma. What can we do?
I've got some thoughts, but I'm going to open it up for Mary and Alex first before I start riffing.
Well, you start riffing because I'm thinking of how I want to respond.
Can I have one to contribute here, and I've heard it a few different times. I actually have a compare and contrast example here too. There's a story from an insurance carrier panel and this was pre-COVID, who were going through an exercise of developing a campaign around mental health care. And they brought together quite a large panel of, local companies, executives to talk about what was happening in their workplace and, what could they create to help eliminate stigma. And one of the executives said, my people don't have mental health issues. That is the example of, creating an environment where people won't ever want to say anything if they've heard anything come out of that person's mouth to that end, right? On the flip side, I heard a story yesterday from someone who had gone to one of their company meetings, and their leader stands up in front of everybody and basically starts his conversation with, these are my responsibilities, this is what I do, and I have a therapist that I talk to twice a month. Vastly different approaches to creating and setting a stage for who would you rather talk to, where would you rather ask?
Yeah. And so it's that it is creating an environment where it's okay to not be okay, right? Which is exactly what that second leader did. And it's, as many of, I'm sure all of us know, the direct supervisor or manager has a tremendous impact on the experience that a frontline worker would have, right?
Yes.
So, and there's many surveys that basically say one or top two reasons why people either leave or stay in a job has to do with that manager. And I would argue that it also has to do, that probably says, one of the top reasons why people will either ask for or not ask for help and support when they need it has to do with that manager. So what is that manager modeling? Is that in team meetings, is that manager mentioning at some, not every team meeting, but at some interval, we've got an employee assistance program. Life gets really stressful. It gets stressful for me too. And when I need help, I reach out to get it. So not divulging a bunch of personal information, but just simply saying, I'm a human being just like you, and it's normal to need help from time to time. And you should take advantage of the employee assistance program. If I can be of any help to you, we can have a confidential conversation. If anyone in HR can be of help to you, you can have a conversation, just letting people know that it's okay to ask for help. Because number one, it takes a long time typically for people to get to the point where, in many cases, where they are ready to admit that they need help. And when they get to that point, the last thing that we want is for them to be shy about asking for it. Most of the folks on this that are here today probably have EAPs in their companies, but everything that I read says that EAPs are used by less than 10% of employees. So why is that? Everybody's got access to these benefits, but they don't use them because maybe they don't trust that it's going to really be confidential. Maybe they don't trust that the culture is going to be supportive of them making that choice. Maybe it's the kind of environment where taking time off or mental breaks isn't encouraged. So these are, besides making these services available, we really have to think about the types of environments that we're creating for our employees and modeling that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to take your time off, and it's okay to get help for yourself is really important.
I'm flashing back on the slide that was put up earlier on the 3 profiles based on age. I would love there to be a profile for this population, this demographic. Their needs are very different. And I know that insurance companies are starting to look at healthcare differently for this population. But if that were more accessible to employers, that would be very, very helpful. On the other hand, we already have outstanding nonprofits in every area of where we work. Partner, and talk to them about this mental health. These are things you can't measure. We would jump so fast on being able to help someone with carpal tunnel. They've been standing, or they've got this manufacturing thing going where the same movement all the time. And L&I is the big mother company that tells us what to do and how to handle it. And they've got all these programs. We don't have an overarching group that helps with mental conditions or just these phases of life. And it would be really nice if there was, but we do have partners, and we have this population themselves. I mean, we talk about not having counselors. We have an immense number of counselors out there, those people that have lived experience. They can talk best to one another. And we need to bring them in and open up more opportunities for people to get the help that they need by the people that understand who they really are. And if we had new profiles on, this is the look of someone who's had a history of drug and alcohol abuse or whatever, it would put them on the map. And I think it would really help with the whole mental illness piece, and getting the help and having the security that they need to move forward. But it's kind of an ignored group because it's big and there's a lot of unmeasurables in it. I mean, how do you measure confidence or a sense of security? You really can't, but they are those measurables that move you from being healthy, non-healthy to being healthy. So we can't ignore those things that we just simply can't measure.
I want to say something about visible disabilities versus invisible disabilities for a moment, because you really touched on that, Mary, by talking about carpal tunnel, and which is a visible disability because someone's saying, my wrist hurts, ow, I can't type. And they usually, with visible disabilities, either they're talking about it openly, they're telling you about it openly, and partly because we don't have a big stigma with that. And so it's more acceptable to talk about, and employees usually come forward when they have some sort of physical problem. When they have something like depression that's getting in their way, for example, they're not as willing to come forward. They might just be late for work. They might just be less productive at work. And they might have a history of really good productivity and good performance. And then the HR manager comes to HR and says, what do I do about this employee? They're really not doing well. And I think something might be going on with them personally. And an HR person is going to say, if they've been to seminars done by lawyers, don't say, are you depressed? Do not, assume, do not label them. You have claims about, will you perceive me as being disabled, and that's why you treated me badly and fired me and all of that. So you do have to be careful, but I think it's not really ultimately very complicated. And this is where I want to assure HR people. It is, yes, the person shouldn't go and try to be a doctor and say, are you depressed? Do you have this? Do you have that? But they can, as a human being, say, you've been a really good performer, but lately I've noticed some changes. Are you okay? How are you doing? Do you need anything? Is there anything I can help you? We have all kinds of ways to help people if you need it. You don't have to say anything about a mental condition or disorder to be a good human being and not run afoul of the law. That's all. I just wanted to add that.
I think it's a great addition. And I think, both of you have brought in some commentary that really connects from the beginning what Michael was talking about, because I'm hearing over and over again, really from all of you, educate, right? People have access to certain things. They might not know it. They might have benefit programs that they don't know about because we have some systems that are complicated that need to be easier to access, and information that needs to be easier to access. We have managers who need to be trained. We hear that as the reason why people are leaving. And we know a lot of it is due to the fact when people are going through things, they don't have that trusted relationship with a manager, who that manager might be great at, their segment of the work, but they're not great with people. So how do we help educate? How do we train? There are lots of answers to both of those things. And, and then I heard Mary say, really build community, right? There's so many people around us who can be our village and our counselors and our friends who can help us through some of these things as well. So
especially, Mary's point is a great one, especially in really big companies that might have employee resource groups. So, maybe they've got an African-American resource group, and maybe they've got an LGBTQ resource group. I've seen other big companies that have mental health resource groups where they allow, employees to get together and have access to each other and talk, so they have this built-in network of folks that they feel comfortable talking to. Again, building that environment where it's okay to actually not be okay and ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have definitely run up over the time, and we've still got people that are here and are listening. I have a question that did come through, and Ty, it's for you. So your services are really specific to the Northwest, is that right? When you're working with employers and helping people job search and match, is that right?
When it comes to job search and match, yes. When it comes to kind of general coaching about how to find employment, I
Okay.
actually have clients. I actually got my first international client not too long ago. So
Great.
I work all across the U.S. and in parts of the UK as well now,
Okay.
if somebody needs it.
Good, good. Well, I mean, and are you aware of others who offer some similar services? We have, we have folks on right now who have employees in places all across the country, and maybe they have HR teams that they would like to bring in for some kind of a training. Are those things that you're interested in, or
Yeah,
do you kind
absolutely.
of network with others? Okay.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely happy to provide anything. Either talking about second chance. Are we talking about second chance hiring?
We might be talking about a little bit of both, really.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
know if Eric wants to add anything additional to his question, but yeah, I mean, obviously everyone is really working through this, and how do we do better? So, and all of you are open to connecting via LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Alex, I imagine that as an employment law attorney, you have many opportunities and ways that you can connect with people, whether they are thinking about getting started in a hiring program like this or have some questions. Tell us really where's your firm and how can people best connect with you?
Yeah, my firm is in Seattle, in downtown Seattle. Probably just Google my name, Alex Higgins Lawyer, and my website will pop up with my phone numbers and all of that. If you want my email address, it's very easy. It's alex@alexjhiggins.com. I'm happy to, I usually give people a few minutes of free advice. If you have a quick question, you just want some free advice, usually I do that for folks, especially if they're trying to do good, like, hire somebody and they want some advice. In terms of a high risk situation and more in-depth analysis, obviously there'd be fees associated with that.
Understood. But ask the Google, and the Google can help connect us all, right?
Exactly.
So as Ty mentioned as well, he has a guide with a scorecard. After this, we'll make all of that available. So all of you who have registered and attended will get that along with this recording. I'll include contact information for our panelists as well. Your certificate for HR credits will also come to you. And we invite you, if you want to continue the conversation, if you would like to connect with Lockton in a way that we can help perhaps in these survey processes or help you simplify, get emotional. We would love to connect with you to help you do that, because as People Solutions, it's so much more than a renewal spreadsheet. We have talked about this so much today. It's all about people. So we welcome conversation with you about how we can help you and your people. Thank you for coming today. Any other questions that you have thought of, or perhaps were too shy to ask, please send them my way. We're happy to get those answered for you and help to connect. So